Doing justice is in the DNA of All Saints Church. It was in the protest by All Saints rector Frank Scott against the deportation of Japanese Americans to Manzanar in 1942. It was in the determination of John Burt to stand with Martin Luther King Jr. in spite of the death threats phoned to the All Saints Rectory in 1964. And it was in the voice of George Regas when he preached these words from the All Saints pulpit on November 11th, 1990.
I know many same-sex couples in this congregation. Some of them I know up close and down deep. I'm convinced without any question of the integrity and goodness of their relationship. I believe I should bless those unions if the request is made. Even though the National Episcopal Church says no to the blessing of same-sex covenants, I feel God is calling me and calling this great parish into a new place. I've come to believe that not to be willing to bless a relationship that is committed to the same standards of love and lasting fidelity as heterosexuals is to say, in effect, to a same-sex couple that whatever their relationship is, it is not fit for public Christian affirmation, support, and celebration. We should not be in such a place in this Christian community. The blessing of a same-sex covenant is the clearest symbol the church can offer that these precious children of God are fully accepted into the life of the congregation. Don't ever underestimate the power of healing such an act would bring. When we bless a union of a gay or lesbian couple, I believe this is what we are saying. The church sees goodness in you, goodness in your love for each other. We recognize your intention to share that love for a lifetime. The church wants to bless you on your journey and sustain you when the way is difficult. We cheer you on your way and hope for your success, and we shall rejoice in your victories and weep for your failures. After a long pilgrimage, I'm solidly committed to bless same-sex covenants at this altar. But I want to listen to you and make our way together as a parish. I look forward to that day when gay men and lesbians will be embraced fully and unconditionally in love with justice. And once more in this church, in this place, at this altar, those famous words of the prophet Amos will mark our corporate life. Let justice flow on like a river, and righteousness like a never-failing stream. Amen.
The decision to preach God, sex, and justice that November morning didn't just happen overnight.
Little by little, the word spread that All Saints welcomed the gay community. And more and more gay and lesbian people began to be part of that community. And they came to me in about 1980, and we want to start a gay and lesbian group. Well, I don't know about that. I didn't know how that would go over. And then, but we talked about it, and so I said, fine, let's do it. Then they wanted to have it announced in the bulletin. I said, golly, why can't we just do it on the side? And so galas were formed, G-A-L-A-S, Gay, Lesbian, All Saints. And so they would invite me about a couple of times, 2 or 3 times a year to come. And it was my first experience, really, of going significantly into a gay or lesbian person's life, to really hear them and be open to them. And so we did that for a few years. And then every time I would go, they would say, we want you, a couple of them there, we want you to bless our unions. And I said, well, I can't do that. Every time I would go, they would push me, battle me, argue with me. But I still questioned how to put it into practice and still keep my job. And so that's when, about 1988, 87, Mark Benson and Phil Straw came to see me. They taught Sunday school. Mark sang in the choir. They wanted me, they came to see me and they said, will you bless our union? I said, well, I'm all for you. I really know you. I love you. I know your love has integrity. But so let's have a blessing here in my office. They said, no, we don't want that. We want a blessing just like a straight couple in the church with all our friends where you bless us there. I said, well, I just don't think I'm ready for that. They said, well, we'll wait till you're ready.
Tim Safford, who's now rector of Christ Church in Philadelphia, was on the All Saints staff at that time and has his own memories of that wait. It was truly Mark and Phil who were the catalysts for the sermon. That is to say, first came Mark and Phil, and through them came George's conversion on blessings as public liturgies, because of their insistence that the ceremony be public, not private or hidden. Not that others weren't pushing him also, but Mark and Phil, from my vantage point, were key. They were the prophets to George, and through him to the larger church. I think it's similar to Jesus' encounter with the Syrophoenician woman. Jesus was only willing to break the barriers present so far, suggesting that to go further as to include her would be like throwing the children's food to the dogs. She looked him in the eye and told him, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the table. In a similar way, Mark and Phil were that woman to George. Tina Clark was one of those others Tim refers to.
We were at the newcomers, forum or whatever you have that they, back then, that they would invite you to. And we were in this big room, and this was all the people that were coming that were wanting to join All Saints. And we were doing a Q&A with our rector, which was George Regas. And so people were asking all the questions and the normal questions that you would ask about joining a new community and church. And all of a sudden I just couldn't stand it anymore, and I raised my hand and I said to George, so what is your feeling on same-sex couples? And the room just got silent. And George just looked at me, and I know now that he's like my dad now, but looking back at it now, I think he was probably saying, oh my God, where did you come from and how soon can you leave? But there was just this pregnant pause, and everybody was looking at George, they were looking at me, And George walked back to me and he says, I'm working on that. and that was it. I think I became, in the beginning, with George, maybe a thorn in his flesh, because I would say, have you figured it out in your head yet how you feel about this? Do you know, I mean, what are you working on? What has to happen? And there was another couple here too, a male couple at the time, that was really pushing the answer, pushing for the answers. And I think that's what I was doing, is pushing for the answers, and not letting there be a distraction. It was a process, and it had nothing to do with, this was a long time ago. This had nothing to do, I mean, anybody that knows George's heart and the heart of this church, it's like, okay, I preach grace, and I preach love, and I preach we all come to the table. So let me see how I get there fully and authentically. Am I happy that 20-something years ago, more than 20 years ago, that I asked George that question? I don't think in my wildest dreams ever thought it could be what it is today.